Welcome to Chronicles of Old Singapore. This is Dr Loh KS, and I speak to people about their memories of Singapore before it became a global city. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel for future episodes. This will help us a lot. Back on the podcast today is Mr. Koh Boon Long, after I think more than a year's gap, right? Mr. Koh, how are you? Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. I'm okay.
You were, of course, one of my first guests, and we talked a lot about when you started your adult life previously, and subsequently we reached the end of your retirement in the Ministry of Education, having started at Jalan Lama School, I think in
Yeah.
1969, right? So what we're gonna do today is actually to go back to the beginning of your life, and I think there are three things that I want to cover today.
Yeah.
One is the Bukit Timah area,
Yeah.
where you grew up in. The second is the staff quarters, where you stayed
Yeah.
in that area, and the third one are the schools you attended. Some of them are in the area, but some of them, the secondary school is a bit further away, lah, right?
Yeah.
So a lot to go through, and I'm very sure that Mr. Koh will tell us some great stories again. But before we start, what I want to ask you, Mr. Koh, is how's your book coming along?
On my book, it should be by early next year. My
Right.
son is helping me together. I'm more or less completed, but he's trying to shorten it.
What is the title, if I may ask?
Okay. 7 exciting decades. Life of educator in Singapore.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
You are self-publishing this one?
Sorry?
You are self-publishing the book?
Yeah, I'm self-publishing it.
Okay. Will there be a book launch?
Yeah. Hopefully. I'll see how.
Okay, great,
Okay.
great. There should be one, I think. I think it will
Yeah.
be something that people are interested to find out more about.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
I was reading.
Yeah.
I'm
Go
reading
ahead.
this book. I don't know whether you can see this book
Yes,
here.
yes. Yeah.
On your chapter, interview with Lee Ti Tong, and he mentioned about Bukit Timah. He was a legislative assemblyman who was immediately nabbed in 1963, I think. Yeah, the
Yes.
election. Yeah, so you had a good time with him. He mentioned something about some factories around there as well. In Bukit Timah, yeah,
Yes,
the
yes.
textile factory or something. Yeah, if you
Yeah.
recall, yeah, but he didn't make much of it. He was saying that he got support from the unions around that area because he was a unionist. Lee Ting Tong.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's an interesting book. It belongs to my son actually.
Yeah, I mean, Bukit Timah is really interesting, right?
Yeah,
It was already a very developed area before the
correct.
rest of Singapore was
Yeah,
developed. And it's so great today that you're here because you live there and you remember those places very well.
yeah,
So,
yeah. Maybe I'll
the,
just begin a little bit on
yeah,
that point.
yeah.
This
Go
road
ahead.
is actually not that straight. If you look at the map, actually Bukit Timah Road begins from the city, from a place, a junction of Sleggy Road and Serangoon Road. All the time I thought that you have gone to Queen Street because actually Queen Street, at the end of it, there's a bus terminus. And when we took 170, or at that time number 1 or something like that, it normally ends there. So Bukit Timah Road actually starts a bit later when the bus comes out and turn along Rocho Canal Road. On the other side is Sungai Road that goes down to Queen Street. So from there, Sleggy Road comes up all the way to Newton, and then at Jalan Wayang, that's now called, let me see, it is the road that comes and link with Whitley Road, right? It comes there. And then up there, the next part is familiar to me because from Farrer Road onwards, upward, that's where I stayed at Duchess Road. Next, it is actually part of the area of Bukit Timah, and then over to 6 Mile or 6.5 Milestone, and to 7 Mile. Now, after 7 Mile, then it becomes Upper Bukit Timah Road. Upper Bukit Timah Road from 7 miles onwards above that. If you look at the map, the altitude actually of Bukit Timah Road is actually very flat from the southward section. That means before reaching Bukit Timah, all the road there was a very level road. Then when you reach 7 Mile Bukit Timah Road, it starts to move up to Hume Height. That's where the elevation is. And from there, the Upper Bukit Timah Road ends at 10 Milestone, where Bukit Panjang is, where I study at Bukit Panjang Government High School. So at Bukit Panjang, from there onwards, at the end of it, 10 miles, it will go all the way Woodlands Road to reach the Causeway. That's where I actually stayed for a short while when I was staying in Marsiling. So actually, all along that road has lots of memory to me, because basically, when I came to the age of about 5 or maybe 6, or the most 6, maybe 4 or 5, I'm not too sure, when we moved from Changi, when my parents were working as a cook in a European household in Changi. The earliest memory was seaside at Changi. Then we moved to Bukit Timah, where I spent almost a decade at the place called Sime Darby, where now formerly was known as Tri-City, Tricity, Tri-City House. And that is the location of the Sime Darby office, residence, the quarters of some of the Europeans, as well as the quarters for us.
So Tri-City is here at the left,
yes,
right side.
It's on the extreme right, or the southeastern side of that road.
Yeah.
And if you notice, there's only one building. But actually, there were some other low-rise. This Tri-City is a four-story building with upper deck. So it's quite a large building. So that's why it's located there. And that's why it's shown there on the map.
Is this a residence or a commercial house?
That's both a residence and office. So okay. In the lower level, on the ground floor, there were offices there. Then on the above will be the quarters for their officers, for the European officers. For our quarters, is not shown. It's actually on the left of that small building, and that is a lower level. By the way, the elevation is very strange. If you look carefully, there's actually a road coming in from Bukit Timah Road. Yeah, yes. And now you can see it. That road there, yes. Then as it comes in, if you comes in, and on the left as the person comes in, on the map it shows on the right is the Tri-City house. That's where the office were, as well as some store areas on the ground floor. The second level and the third level are the places where the European stays. And on top of the third level will be an open deck, sort of a roof garden in that sense. It's a very large building, actually. And then as you come in from the gate, from Bukit Timah Road, as a person comes in, he looks on the left will be Tri-City. On his right will be a lower level, about almost 1.5 meters down, on a depression where the quarters for other non-executive staffs were found. And so that's an interesting part, because that's where we, or at least I, spent most of my time when I was a young kid playing around the area with other quarters who were the laborers. They came from the states of Kalari. They're actually Indians. They came in. They were the first foreign workers during the time of 1950s. That would be the early 50s, 1950s. So right. It's interesting part of it is that there were kampongs as you move towards the northwest, meaning towards the General Electric Company along that road, Bukit Timah Road. By the way, people may not know, before the 60s, the Bukit Timah Road was a two-way street because Dunnan Road was not used yet as a one-way traffic down towards town. So Bukit Timah Road actually was separated from Dunnan Road from a big canal, which were not often able to get across, except there's one or two points where you see Binja Park is where you can go up there. So directly opposite Binja Park was the General Electric companies, and towards the south of General Electric Company was a Malay kampong. So actually that was a kampong area. To the south of that map, that was not shown. There was a Malay kampong area. And so in between General Electric Company and Tri-City House was a vast area of marshy land, low-lying area, and which we were, at least I used to roam with the playmates that came along. So that's an interesting part. And then directly opposite Tri-City House is Jalan Chantek, Jalan Kampong Chantek.
Okay,
all right?
So that's where it was. Right, okay.
Yeah, Jalan Kampong Chantek, directly opposite Tri-City House.
Yeah,
right?
it says
On the north,
the
on
road.
the northern
So
part.
was the kampong here as well?
Yeah, it's called a kampong, and that kampong goes right up very much further to the north, if the map is correct, to the north, where there was a covered reservoir, but that wasn't built yet in the 1950s. I think probably was built in the 60s. There was a covered reservoir that took water from the pipeline that came down from the causeway. Right, that was a covered reservoir. I can't remember the name, but we can trace it. It's still there. Okay, so between Jalan Kampong Chantek and Binja Park, there's a vast area of fruit areas, fruit farm or fruit, they are mainly fruit orchards. All right, and that's an area where in the early 60s or the late 50s, they used to have Fleming there. That was the Fleming of P. Ramlee, Pontiana, and other things. And by then, I was probably in my late primary school. I used to be able to go up to Bukit or Binja Park and then walk down to see the Fleming around the area. That was a very interesting point because plums at that early years, in the late 50s and early 60s, were using part of the place there. It was actually a Malay kampong, higher class kampong, and so their buildings were very majestic in some ways. So that's why they used that place for the site of or the location of Fleming. Okay, so as you move along Bukit Timah Road, let's move back to Bukit Timah Road. General Electric, beyond General Electric was William Jacks, another sort of industrial or factories in some ways. I can't remember what they manufacture, but it was, I can't remember that. But then further to the west, actually that road is actually quite strange. Actually, there was a bit of westerly movement, not northerly, to the west of industrial gases, Malayan company. That didn't last very long, actually, because I remember after some time that was so closed down more or less. Maybe they moved to Princess Elizabeth. I'm not too sure. So then what's interesting is that in your map, it shows the green bus depot, and that's beyond the railway line, okay, the old railway line there. And the green bus depot is along Bukit Timah Road, but also sort of in the southern part is King Albert Park. Correct. So we used to move all the way in cycling, perhaps up to the green bus terminus, green bus depot, and sort of hang out around there. But there wasn't much to see except for the buses. At that point, there wasn't this McDonald's that is now currently there. Yeah. Okay, so that's Bukit Timah Road. And then opposite, of course, you have this Lam Chun factory, rubber factory, which was taken over by Sherwood Towers currently. Currently, it's Sherwood Towers, and the shopping center as well. Okay, and of course the old Yo Hap Seng is still there, I think. Okay, so that's on the Rifle Range side, Rifle Range Road side. Okay, so this is the area where I used to roam and play around, and it was a very more or less quite rural, because especially on our side and next to General Electric, there was a small little canal that comes down, or a little stream that comes down from the south to the canal. So that we used to catch fish around there, and it's a quite rustic area in that sense. And there were birds which we were, as young kids, try to shoot with catapults down there. So it's an area which, and then if you move further south, of course, there's a cemetery, the
Yes.
Hakka Cemetery.
Do you mean this one, or because there are
Yeah,
two, right?
that's the one there. That's this around this area. There's a Chinese cemetery. Can you see the whole
Yes.
big area? You see on the map, it's written there, Chinese cemetery. Is bounded by the old Holland Road or Binjap Park area, but the cemetery is more on the westerly side, not too far from the railway line, right? So we would move as far as that, but we were actually, as small kids, were quite frightened because there was no boundary actually. There were no fences, in other words, and we could move back to where in the northern part where we stay. When I say we, will be some playmates who come from the area of Kampong Chantek, Chantek area, as well as Swiss Club. Swiss Club area will be in the northwestern side where the club is. Correct. There were some European houses, Swiss Club Road, where those people who worked there were Highlanders, as we were, and I used to sort of meet them occasionally. Interestingly, this road called Holland Road actually is the old Holland Road, because that links. Okay, I don't think this map shows it. It links to the current Holland Road. Yeah, does it? Yeah, it does show that. It goes all the way, and you can see it comes to this huge, big Holland Road, which we are currently using to go to Botanic Garden or Holland Village or whatever. So that is actually a small road, and it was the small road actually was a part of the boundary of the cemetery as well. So that was a very big area, and I think they have cut a big canal there now in this area. So it's a rustic area, and quite interestingly, because there were both Malay kampong as well as Chinese kampong nearby. The Chinese kampong will be more the Kampong Chantek area. The Malay kampong will be the area next to the GE factory area. There was a small Malay kampong. All right, so those are the two areas that I frequently move. Kampong Chantek is a long way in, actually. And it started on the main road of Danyan Road. Yeah, if you look at Kampong Chantek. But if you go all the way up, there's the Chinese kampong right inside, where my parents actually bought a small attap hut for about, at that time, $1,000. It was probably with 3 rooms or something, and we sold it later. So I used to visit that kampong by either cycling in, or if the bicycle was not available and my father had to use it, I walk in, which is probably in those days they say it's about 1 mile or 1.5 miles right in. So it's an old kampong right in there. So that's part of the thing. And by the way, Binjai Park was developed into Hong Kong Park area in that sense. Yeah, I can see Kampong Chantek there. Yeah, this way all the way in. You can see some houses there. The actual kampong right at on the right side, meaning on this map is more on the northern side actually.
So it says Kampong Chantek Bahru, New Kampong Chantek.
Bahru, is it? That's Bahru.
Yeah.
Okay. That means that my parents' place was there because it passes the pipeline actually. Yeah, but the old Kampong Chantek, I'm not sure where it will be. Probably nearer the main road. All right. So this map
Yes.
will probably be in the 1960s, is it correct? Or
No,
50s?
same one, 55.
65.
50, 55.
55.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the old map. Yeah, Swiss Club is on the other side. Okay, so it's correct. It's quite a distance in
Yes.
towards. You can see that there is a line there. I'm not sure whether that is what is that
That
line?
is the pipeline.
Oh, there's a
The
pipeline, right?
city
Yeah,
council
we have to
pipeline.
cross. Yeah, yeah, pipeline. So we have to, if you look carefully, we have to cross the pipeline. Further, if you move it up a bit more, the map can it be moved? No, up the other way. No, sorry, down. Okay. So we will come in and we'll walk along Kampong Chantek Road, and then the pipeline crosses the road actually. You will see under the road
Yes.
maybe it should be under. So then we go straight up to the actual Bahru, the Bahru there. Yeah. So okay, now it's very clear because it shows that the pipe actually crosses there, but there wasn't any reservoir yet. Covered the reservoir. It's somewhere just near the Kampong Chantek Bahru on the just on the left side of that kampung along that pipeline. Okay, that will be
Right.
the current covered reservoir.
Right.
Yeah,
Did you say earlier that Kampong Chantek was mainly Chinese?
yeah. This is mainly Chinese. The new one, the new one. So the old one probably would have been nearer the Danyan Road, and that's where I understand that the prominent or some prominent Malay folks stay and they build their houses right down if you go to the junction of Kampong Chantek Road.
Yeah.
So okay, so if you see the junction of Jalan Kampong Chantek there, that patch of area between the Binja Park, between that whole area will be a Malay kampong. I presume, because there were Malay houses there. But by then, I'm not sure why probably the landlord sold off the land and they moved on, or they had some other place to go. So that will be the old kampong. So the new kampong actually was Chinese kampong. Yeah.
Can you tell us about the old Kampong? Was this like a farming area or
No.
No.
It was more residential and fruit farms, yes. There were fruit farms, but the houses that were kept or remained for the Fleming was more like upper middle class type of houses. So that's why they use it as a Fleming site, right? There must be some older houses which maybe maybe less wealthy Malays would have been staying. So that road, all along that road, will be probably a lot of Malays staying there. But I'm not sure. Probably because of the Turk Club, they moved over to stay at the Turk Club, where they became more like the people who were the science or the people who take care of the horses, and they had their quarters there. So that could be one reason why the old Malay kampung was abolished. I'm not sure about that part. Yeah.
Right. And the new Kampong Chantek Bahru where you stayed. Right.
Yeah.
Could you describe that? How were the houses like?
Okay. The houses were typical Chinese farmhouses. There were a bit of farming, and I remember they were more like small holding vegetable farming area. The land wasn't that fertile, I noted, and so probably the crops wasn't as large as those, because this was a bit of hilly area. The elevation was slightly higher inside, because as you move along Jalan Kampong Chantek, the slope will be there will be slope towards the Bukit Timah Hill or the Central Reserve area. So that's interesting. By the way, this Bukit Timah Road wasn't straight, because if it had gone from north-south, direct line, it would have gone into the nature reserve. So I presume that this road skirts the central water catchment area, and it moved more to the west, and then it went straight up. If you notice that after 7 Mile Bukit Timah Road, then the road is straightened up, and it goes all the way to Woodlands, and there was a straight road up to the causeway, to the causeway area. So that's a strange thing about Bukit Timah Road, is that it did not hit straight up because it's basically probably the old resident avoided the dense jungle of the central catchment area. Yeah.
Yeah. Any memories of the railway line?
Okay. We were not really, very strangely, when we play at that area, we used to go up that place there. There was no gate or anything that stopped us from going up. So the railway line seems to be a bit deserted, but there was railway station there. And strangely, it didn't stop at the station much. Probably much used in the earlier days, probably might have stopped. But that place was the one that later, much later, when the industrial development came about, that the junction was there near the railway station. The junction then moved towards Jurong. There was a sideline which started from the Bukit Timah railway station. Right, that's it. But I recall that there seems not to be any sort of security in that sense. People were walking along the railway line sometimes, and we as young kids who play around there, and sometimes being mischievous, we'll put some stone up on the rail and metal piece in between. There was a little gap, and can see the railway come out, the train coming, and they would just wipe your stone away. You will sort of dash it off or smash it up. Okay, so that railway line was that sort of not really that often where we see train passing by. All right. Okay.
Okay. So now can we talk about your house, Sime Darby?
Okay.
How did your family come to be staying in that house?
Okay.
Quarters.
When my parents started working at Sime Darby at Tri-City House, they were given a servant's quarter. So that quarter was next to the laborers' quarter. Actually, I've drawn out a map, but I don't think I can locate it in a moment. But anyway, that place was flood very prone because it was in lower level where we stayed, or where the laborers stayed. So very often, at least during the December or November, December, January months, we will be sort of we had to go through that flooding that comes through, and so
I mean the whole Bukit Timah was always flood prone, wasn't it?
Yeah, flood prone. That part was very flood prone. But then you notice that because of an elevation where the Europeans stay or the office were, they build it on a higher ground, so the flood doesn't affect them. And the road maybe just a few millimeters of water, but they never get what we suffered when we were children or when we were staying there. And also the strange thing.
How bad was the flooding?
Sorry?
How bad was the flooding?
Oh, it can last about a few hours. And
how high?
It can be about 1.5 meters between that. So it is quite dangerous in some ways because we were at the mercy of those water. But as kids, when it was as the flood recedes or as it goes, the level goes lower, when lower, so we would come out and play in the water. So that's the interesting part of it. But then there were often there were other creatures, whether it's insects or mouse or maybe snakes. Snakes will come out because they were driven from their lodging in the ground. So that's a part of it. Also, it can actually be quite swift as it receded, because there was a drain on between, yeah, I think just before the road, there was a small drain, and that drain would try to drain the water over to the other side where the canal was, right? So there was a sort of a flow that was quite fast. Okay, so that part of it. About my quarters would be that we had actually by maybe that building was one-story building, and that was probably about 10 meters by 20 meters thereabout. And my father had to partition it so that there will be space. We were a family at that point of time, family about of 4 children, three to four children, because my brother came after that, or my sister. I had 2 elder sisters, and then myself. Then after that, 1 sister that came, and then we have another 3 brothers that came. So, but not all. In fact, all of them were born during that period before we left there in 1961 or 62 to move out, because the officers were being closed, and they were starting an office downtown. So we were not needed there. Yeah.
So you mentioned that these were servants' quarters.
Yeah, 7 quarters, 7 or laborers' quarters.
Right. Okay. So what was your father doing?
My father was a cook for the Europeans, and my mother
Okay.
washes clothes for them, washerwoman in that sense.
When you say Europeans, you mean Tri-City?
Yeah, there was European, they call themselves executives, because they work not only within this building, but there was another office in downtown. So I couldn't recall exactly where the Sime Darby main office was. This is actually a branch, because this place has storage area, not in the building, but in the compound of the Sime Darby compound, meaning that there were other storage. I remember there were construction metal, and there were beams, and then in the store there were other things that were kept there. And then towards the end of that period, they started the tractor. I think they call it tractor Sime Darby or something. So they had a showroom there. So that's how they function for this place. This is actually more of a suburban area by then, and so it was considered away from the city. So they had a residence there.
Are you Hainanese?
Yeah.
So that's how your father was a cook for the Europeans.
Yes, was a cook, and my mother was a washerwoman.
Do you remember what he cooked? What dishes he cooked for the Europeans?
European steak, definitely chips, and of course mashed potatoes. And then the vegetables will be things like the European type of vegetable, beans, French beans. And he often also does roast chicken, not the Chinese way, but the European ways. So sometimes we will have leftovers. Christmas was the important part, because the Europeans and the staff will clear the lower or the ground floor, and they will invite people across. And then for us, for kids and all that, we watch from the outside. They will have their sing-song or whatever, but it was not religious. It was more celebration of Christmas. So we were sometimes rewarded because we watch, and then when they finish, or they will come out and they say, you can take some water or drinks, or maybe ice cream left over or whatever. So that was the part that we often watch. So this place was a sort of a multiple purpose building, residential on the first or the top 2 floors, and then at the ground floor, the office, as well as certain part that were used for storage. But the main storage was in the compound, bigger items like building beams or other type of storage like metal pieces and all that. So it's actually quite dangerous because as kids, we play around those areas. And there was no supervision because my parents were working and the people who were there were probably quite sort of lackadaisical, those who worked there. They will see it as, oh, never mind, let these kids roam around. And so we took quite a bit of risk sometimes. And I remember when it floods or sometimes the field between this company called General Electric and Sime Darby area, that was like a swimming pool. So actually, the field was really flooded for quite a while, and the water doesn't get run off because sort of it was stagnant there. And so we'll take time to go into those ponds and swim and dirty ourselves and or whatever it is. So the one interesting part of this place where the field was, there was a certain type of not football field but just open land, was that the people from General Electrics, I think, they were organized to invite the kids from the Malay kampong to start their sports or their staff sports or staff event or whatever. And that was interesting because I took part in some of the races, but I couldn't match the Malay boys. They were much faster, all right? And the other thing which towards the time when there were the industrial strike, there were such thing as strikes. So that was, of course, maybe not manipulated, but they were led by those Barisan, or the earlier part when they were still the PAP leftist members. So that was interesting because as sympathetic my parents were, they will not go directly themselves, but they will ask us kids to bring, let's say, some pots of tea or coffee or whatever to give to them because they felt sympathetic towards these people. So those, I remember quite clearly. By then, I was probably in my late primary school in 1958, 57, 58. Those were in the years where there were industrial strike. And even in 59, there were still strikes going on. So there was lots of turmoil in that time. But yet, the strikes was not a very serious type of event in the sense that there were fights. But there were some sing-song and definitely there were students from the Chinese high school or Nanyang Girls High School. They came up and they rallied them. And I presume that when the Nanyang University undergrads would have come in as well. All right. So that was some sort of a fun thing. But we didn't know the song or we didn't sing with them or whatever. We sort of observed and we were quite interested. There was one particular point that I remember was in 59 in June when we had the election, the first self-government election, 1959. I think it was June, was it? Or May or June, 1959. All right. So we see election posters around, not that many, but a few. And so as kids, we were wondering what was this. We didn't understand because I was probably in primary 5, primary 6. Yeah. Or 59 would be, I'd be sec 1. But we together, it was some political thing. But yet, due to our mischievousness, we would draw some of this symbol, whether it's the PAP lightning sign or whether it was Singapore People Alliance sign or whatever. And I was reprimanded by my parents because they say, you shouldn't do this. I couldn't understand why. Now, that's one instance of political sort of matters. But the other matter which I remember distinctly was my parents, while not being a member, but he was quite sort of, or I say not only my father, but I think other relatives as well, sort of went with him, and he took me along the 7 Mile 7 Mile, where Lim Chin Siong was there. And you remember the riot that happens after his matter about Pa Mata.
Yes.
We were actually at that point, but we couldn't understand because they were speaking Hokkien and we were Hainanese, but we knew that it was something very rowdy. And so it was a matter which I think it's seared in my memory of how intense this person was and who was actually very fervent. But I didn't realize then on the stage there were the other executive member of the PAP was there. All right. So I remember. But now that as we read as we read about that thing, and Tam actually, I think you know the historian Tam, right?
Yes.
That Tam actually went to find out that actually he didn't instigate that incident. What he said was that don't Paramata,
Yeah.
actually. So it was a very controversial thing that he was arrested and then he was put in as a detainee, political detainee.
Seventh milestone would be King
Yeah,
Albert
would
Park.
be the market area.
Market area. Okay.
The market area where we would do our shopping. Now, the other interesting thing was that my parents were given the liberty to go and shop there and to buy things for the Europeans to cook and all that. So they will come back, and by then I still was able to fathom what they were doing, because when there was another relative who knew a bit of English, would write down what they had purchased and all that. And then you notice that later on I realized that the price was not exactly, because I will follow them to the market to buy fish, meat, or vegetable, or whatever. Well, not exactly what the price was then. They would have inflated it and they make some commission out of it. So that was one interesting thing. But they never got me into the act because I couldn't write properly by then. Right. So those were things that happened, and it sort of made me realize that they were also quite entrepreneurial in some sense. Right. But the Europeans were happy to pay because I think the salary was much higher than any of the Asians and during that period of time. So that was during the Lim Yew Hock government and David Marshall. Yes. And then when 59 came, and it was a period where we were still living in Sime Darby, that we felt that it was a release because it was some sort of self-governing state then, right? I remember by then I have gone to study in the secondary school, the first year at Bukit Panjangama High School. Okay, if you think back, when I went to Duchess Road Primary, actually you have shown a map earlier, or you have sent me a map, but that one was in the 1953 for 6 years, would be, that's strange, 53 1 year to 58. Would that be correct? Yeah. So I had 6 interesting years at that school, which was also along Bukit Timah Road. And it was, the mean of transportation was on the handlebar, on the sidebar of my father's bicycle. All right, so we were there. Actually, there are 2 schools there. We first went to Danyan Primary on Danyan Road side, but because they were on the main road, there was no vacancy. So then they suggested, or the Danyan Road people say, there's another school inside, because that road was quite far in. That school is quite far in Duchess Road. And you notice that it's actually right behind Chinese High School. Chinese High School was on a higher ground, and our school was at the back of the hill where Chinese High was. That's Chinese High School.
Road School.
Yeah, sorry, yeah. Duchess Road School, and then you have Danyan Road on the other side. All right. So if you see that we had to walk in probably about maybe 1 kilometer, or maybe there about 3/4 of a kilometer. That school is 1 story, and it's a long line of a long stretch of 1-story building. I have some photograph of that actually. I can send you later. But what is interesting was the road then was gravel, not tar road, Duchess, Duchess Road. All right. Later in my life, after Sime Darby, we live along the road actually, just past the junction of the side road to the school. So there were some Chinese people staying around there. The Malay also around that road, Coronation Road, right in. There were quite a big Malay kampong there. So this is another area which I was familiar with. And by then, it will probably be in the early 60s. So we stayed there about five years before we moved in the late 60s to Toa Payoh. Correct. So this school was built about in the early 50s. And the first thing that by the way, this is not the first school that I attended. Before 6 years old, my parent decided to put us to the 7 mile, at that time was called Su Chin Primary or near Pewa Primary. I don't think you have a map of that one there. But it was aborted because I refused to go because it was a Chinese school. That's an interesting thing because we had some influence of listening to English, and sometimes there were radios or some newspapers were brought. But when I was brought to this school, and actually was before 6 years old, and it was quite frightening, and there was nobody that I knew there, and I refused to sort of be quiet, and so they gave up after about 3-4 days. So the first incident of schooling was interesting because it was actually very traumatic. So this second school was slightly different, and I was more well prepared, and I could understand more of instruction from the teachers there. Now this school is of a village school actually, so every level of study, there were about 3 or 4 classes only. Okay, now it's again a rural school, and surprisingly, it's not shown on this map. There was a Pewa Primary on the left of this school. This is the Duchess Road. If you look on the left of this map, meaning on the western side of the Duchess School, there was no sign of that says that there is Pewa Primary. All right. Yeah. So that's interesting because I remember that school later moved to 7 Mile also. That's next to the Glory Church. All right. So let me say that by then I think the school was moving, and so Duchess Road School was actually by itself. All right, by itself. What? Let me see. Is this the map? Yeah. Okay. So your map doesn't have it, but actually there was a Chinese school there, and I recall that it was probably Pewa Primary. Okay, this school was interesting because again we encounter floods, but we also have good mix of students. Probably there were more Malay boys. There were probably about 20% or 30% Chinese boys, and then there were a few Indian boys. My first experience in schooling was quite pleasant because there was Indian boy by name of Wadi Walu, whose father was a Tamil teacher in the school. So we were quite privileged because sometimes he gave us a lift out from the school after. By the way, it was mainly in the afternoon. It's a very strange thing. We did not rotate we did rotate alternate years. So the first year was in afternoon, and then next year we morning, afternoon, morning, afternoon. So by the time we finished school was late, maybe 6 o'clock, and then he gave us a leave out. Now I used to visit this boy who lived not far from the school at the Six Milestone. Now that's another small area where, as you said, was quite developed. The Six Milestone area was quite a mixed area. They were both Indian, Malay, and Chinese area. Okay, but I don't think you can see that on the map. Is there a 6 mile?
Race
Yes, you
course
can see
village.
race course. So
Yeah.
they cater to both the clients in the club that is in the northern part of this area, and this area were the different avenues, the Sixth Avenue area, all right? The race course village. I'm not sure. It's called a village there. Is it correct?
Yeah, that's what it says.
Yeah. This race course village. I didn't realize this. They call it a race course village, but actually there were quite a lot of shops even then earlier. But there was interesting thing of this place was that there was a open air cinema at the Sixth Avenue. Not at the Sixth Avenue, but actually at the where the village was. All right, not along the Sixth Avenue, because there are about Sixth Avenue, yeah, first, second, third, fourth, up to six. So this place was another horn that for me when I came down from the Tri-City or Sime Darby area. And you notice that we came down, there was this junction where it's called Holland Road Junction. If you look at the map, yeah, that's, bring it up further, the junction there. And sometime, instead of going all the way down to the Kampong or the six milestone area, we move up to Garlic Avenue. That's another interesting part. Because Garlic Avenue, from there we could go across to the cemetery, but Garlic Avenue has some fruits tree also. And that's a place where recently, you remember the people who were caught for money laundering. There are a lot of big bungalows in there. So that's an interesting part. Okay, so coming back to Duchess Primary School, I had a pretty good time there. I enjoyed my primary school. There wasn't many homeworks to do. And but one of the things I remember that I did fairly well, but towards the end, maybe in primary 4 or primary 5, they insisted that I go down to take tuition because the primary 6 living school living cert was still then on, correct? In primary 6 PSLE, correct? I was told to go down to one of my relatives' home, and not home, but actually it was a clan association building. The clan association building was actually started when my father knew one of the Europeans who was probably a Chinese protectorate or something, that he facilitated the building of this clan association, and he got this building up, or he was in the committee, and then this relative used it as a tuition center in the evening. So I went there for 1 or 2 years. During the course of going there, there was gangsterism in the area of Queen Street area. That building, by the way, was at Waterloo Street. So it was not very far from the bus terminus, where we took the bus down to Queen Street and we walked over. And the gangsters used to harass us, although we're small chap. So one day I told one of the sons of this relative, his name was Koh Chin Kok. He was a clerk and he could speak good English, so therefore he gave tuition in the evening. And he didn't charge us much. The tuition was very simple. There was a round table in the clan association building. We just sat around, and he didn't do any teaching, but he walked around to supervise and make sure we did our homework. So that, but actually it was quite effective. He actually was very strict, stricter than the teacher what I had at the primary school. And so anyway, coming back to this incident about gangsterism, being a 11-year-old or 10 years old a boy, or even older, 12 years old, we were harassed. And so I told one of the sons of this Mr. Koh Ching Kok. And so he actually, or they, two of the sons actually went up and actually with me. And when they saw those small kids, they said, hey, actually they're just more street gangs. They're not gangsters or secret society or whatever. But to me at that point, as a young chap, as a young boy lad, I think it was quite frightening. But whatever it is, we weathered the storm and I kept going there. But one of the things that I did, I remember my parents were very annoyed, was sometimes instead of going down all the way, I would go and see cinema at the 6th Avenue, the open air cinema. And I really recall that. And instead of the bus fare being used, I used the money to pay to go in. Maybe it was 10 cents or 20 cents or whatever it is. So that was the interesting part. And I think I should write that in my memo, but I forgot about that. But whatever it is, it was a good number of 6 years there. And I didn't learn much, but I managed to clear the PSLE. After the second time, not because of my fault, there was a leak that year in 1958. There was a leak, and the Ministry of Education was under Chu Si Ki, I think.
Yes,
Huh?
yes.
Yeah. So the Lim Yu Hock, they were so sort of very negligent in that sense. So
Yeah.
we had to sit the second time for the PSLE. But whatever it is, we cleared. And you know how many people were from that school? There were probably about 100 odd students for primary 6, that level. There was only one stream, one section, because there was the afternoon section. So PSLE, so I was in the morning stream in primary 2, primary 4, primary 6. So I was lucky I was in the morning at that point. So it wasn't so enervating or so difficult to study in the afternoon or sleepy or that. But whatever it is, there were only 6 out of 120 probably. Yeah. So you can imagine that percentage. I was just reading the book that says that there were only 30%, or about 30% of people who were allowed to clear the PSLE at that point of time in the 58, 59, 60 or whatever, 25 to 30%. So my school, this Duchess Road Primary School, only has 6 out of 120. So that is less than 5%. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yeah.
That was less than 5%. Then I read in the book that it says that the reason for only 25% being allowed to go was because there was not enough secondary school at that time, that period of time, before 1959. I was in the 1959 first year, and it was the newly built school that was started probably by Lim Yu Hock, but taken over the PAP government. All right, and the school that I went to, Bukit Panjang High School, was actually started at Mangsil Secondary 2 years prior to that, because the building wasn't ready at Bukit Panjang. All right, so that's a history of Bukit Panjang. But whatever it is, I think my time at Duchess Primary was quite an interesting time, and it was relaxing, and there was a bit of sports, and there were also good, I would say not good teachers, but teachers who were probably not that concerned about academic results. So that's why they're only 6%. The thing as I look back was that because I went for the tuition, and probably that helped quite a bit. Helped in some ways that I was more focused on reading those books that were brought along with me. All right. So that was the period when along Bukit Timah, and that will be called the 5th milestone